Hello brothers and welcome to Sigma Grandpa channel. Loyalty has a limit. The quietest people often leave the loudest lessons. Here's something most people never realize. The people who stay the longest are usually the ones who leave without warning. Not because they enjoy walking away, but because they've already spent months or even years giving second chances that nobody noticed. Psychologists have long observed that patient, highly loyal people often tolerate far more mistreatment than others before reaching their breaking point. But when that invisible line is finally crossed, something remarkable happens. They don't explode, they don't beg, they don't chase, they simply change. And that change catches everyone off guard. A loyal Sigma male is exactly like that. He's not the one who threatens to leave every other week. In fact, he's usually the one holding everything together while everyone else is testing his patience. He absorbs disrespect, overlooks disappointments, and keeps giving people opportunities to do better. It's almost like he has a subscription to the maybe they'll change club. Spoiler alert, it eventually expires. But make no mistake, his silence isn't weakness, and his patience isn't permission. The real danger isn't when he gets angry. It's when he gets clear, because the moment a loyal Sigma male realizes his loyalty has been mistaken for endless tolerance, he begins making decisions that don't need announcements, arguments, or applause, and by the time people notice what's happening, they're already too late. So what exactly does a loyal Sigma male do when you've pushed him one step too far? The answer isn't what most people think. And the final few signs may completely change the way you understand loyalty forever. Number one, he deletes you from his future before he deletes you from his phone. One of the biggest mistakes people make is believing they'll know the exact moment a loyal Sigma male is done. They expect a dramatic goodbye, a long argument, or some emotional speech explaining why he's leaving. But that's rarely how it happens. The real ending takes place long before anyone notices it. The first thing he removes isn't your contact. It isn't your photos. It isn't even your conversations. It's your place in his future. He quietly stops including you in the life he's building. The goals he once shared with you become private. The dreams he hoped you would celebrate become personal missions. He no longer wonders where you'll fit into his next chapter because, in his mind, you've already been written out of the story. The strange part is that nothing on the outside may seem different at first. He still answers politely. He still acts respectfully. He doesn't create unnecessary drama or make a show of cutting people off. But behind that calm behavior, a major decision has already been made. The emotional door has closed, even if the physical one is still slightly open. This is what makes a loyal Sigma male so difficult to read. He doesn't leave in the heat of anger. He leaves after the fire has gone out. Once he reaches that point, he isn't reacting anymore. He's simply following through on a decision he's carefully thought about. People often mistake his silence for hesitation. They believe he just needs more time, one sincere apology, or one heartfelt conversation. What they fail to understand is that he already gave time. He already waited. He already hoped things would improve. Every ignored warning and every repeated disappointment slowly erased the future he once imagined with them. By the time someone finally realizes he's pulling away, they're usually trying to save a future that no longer exists in his mind. That's the painful truth about pushing a loyal Sigma male too far. He doesn't disappear overnight. He disappears from your tomorrow first, and everything else simply follows. Number two, he stops translating your behavior. One of the greatest gifts a loyal Sigma male gives the people he cares about is something they rarely notice. He translates their behavior into the best possible meaning. When you're short with him, he assumes you're stressed. When you forget your promises, he tells himself you've been busy. When your attitude changes, He searches for reasons instead of jumping to conclusions. His loyalty makes him an expert at giving people the benefit of the doubt. That habit doesn't come from weakness. It comes from hope. He believes everyone has bad days, makes mistakes, and deserves patience. He would rather understand someone than judge them too quickly. But every act of patience has a limit. When he's pushed too far, something inside him shifts. He stops searching for hidden explanations and starts accepting what he sees. Suddenly, your excuses lose their power because he no longer feels responsible for making them believable. The stories he once told himself to protect your image disappear. That change is impossible to fake. He no longer convinces himself that disrespect was accidental. He no longer calls repeated disappointment a misunderstanding. He no longer labels selfishness as temporary. For the first time, he sees your actions without loyalty editing the truth. That is often the moment everything changes. Many people become uncomfortable because they were never dealing with a blind man. They were dealing with a patient one. His silence wasn't proof that he didn't notice. His forgiveness wasn't proof that he agreed. He simply chose peace over conflict for as long as he believed things could improve. Once that belief dies, so does the filter that protected you. The hardest part for the other person is realizing they didn't suddenly become worse. They had been showing the same behavior all along. The difference is that the loyal Sigma male has stopped translating it into something kinder than it really is. And once he starts seeing people exactly as they are, instead of who he hoped they could become, earning back his trust becomes one of the hardest things anyone will ever try to do. Number 3, he returns your energy with surgical accuracy. A loyal Sigma male is rarely the kind of person who keeps score. In the beginning, he gives more than he receives without making a big deal about it. He checks in first, shows up when he's needed, keeps his word, and puts genuine effort into the relationship. He believes loyalty isn't something that should be measured every single day. But when he's been pushed too far, that generosity changes in a way most people never expect. He doesn't become cruel. He doesn't suddenly start playing mind games. Instead, he begins matching your energy with remarkable precision. If you make little effort, you'll receive little effort. If you take days to respond, he no longer rushes to answer within minutes. If you stop showing interest in his life, he quietly stops asking about yours. There's no anger in it, no hidden message, just balance. What makes this so unsettling is that many people don't notice how much he was carrying until he puts it down. They thought the relationship naturally worked that way, never realizing he was the one creating the warmth, the understanding, and the consistency that kept everything together. His change forces an uncomfortable truth into the open. The relationship doesn't feel different because he became worse. It feels different because he stopped doing the extra work that covered everyone else's lack of effort. This isn't revenge. Revenge tries to make someone suffer. A loyal Sigma male isn't interested in that. He's interested in fairness. He reaches a point where he refuses to pour from a cup that no one else is helping to fill. People often mistake this calm shift for emotional distance, but it's actually emotional discipline. He's no longer willing to invest where appreciation is missing. He's protecting his time, his energy, and his peace instead of giving them away out of habit. By the time someone realizes they're receiving exactly what they've been giving all along, they often call him changed. The truth is far simpler. He hasn't changed into someone colder. He's simply stopped carrying the relationship alone. And for the first time, the imbalance becomes impossible to ignore. Number 4, he stops trying to save your reputation. One of the quietest forms of loyalty is protecting someone's name when they're not around. A loyal Sigma male does this more often than people realize. When others criticize you, He gives you the benefit of the doubt. When someone spreads rumors, he doesn't add fuel to the fire. He often becomes the one person who speaks fairly about you, even when you're not there to hear it. Most people never notice this because it happens behind closed doors. They assume their reputation is surviving on its own, never realizing someone has been standing between them and unnecessary judgment. But once he's been pushed too far, that silent protection comes to an end. He doesn't launch a campaign against you. He doesn't gossip or reveal your secrets just to settle a score. That isn't who he is. Instead, he steps aside. He no longer feels responsible for defending someone who repeatedly gave him reasons not to. That single decision changes more than people expect. The excuses disappear. The constant explanations vanish. If someone points out your selfishness, your dishonesty, or your disrespect, he doesn't argue anymore. He simply stays quiet because he refuses to lie to protect behavior that even you refuse to correct. Silence can be far more powerful than accusation. Many people are shocked when they discover how much of their image depended on someone else's loyalty. They mistake his refusal to defend them as betrayal, when in reality, the betrayal happened much earlier. He simply reached the point where protecting your reputation meant sacrificing his own integrity. A loyal Sigma male values honesty just as much as loyalty. When those two begin to clash, honesty eventually wins. That's why this change is so final. Once he stops carrying your reputation on his shoulders, you're left to stand on your own actions. If people begin seeing a side of you that he spent years quietly covering, it isn't because he exposed you. It's because he stopped hiding the truth. And for many people, losing his protection hurts far more than losing his presence, because they suddenly realize that loyalty was shielding them from consequences they never even knew were coming. Number 5, he becomes impossible to manipulate because he stops needing closure. One of the biggest reasons manipulation works is because it feeds on hope. As long as someone is waiting for an apology, an explanation, or one last honest conversation, they remain emotionally tied to the situation. A loyal Sigma male understands this better than most, even if it takes him time to get there. In the beginning, he wants answers. He wants to believe there was a misunderstanding. He gives people every opportunity to explain themselves because that's who he is. He values honesty, and he believes difficult conversations can fix broken relationships. But after enough disappointment, something changes. He realizes that not every question gets an answer, and not every ending comes with a clean explanation. Some people will never admit they were wrong. Some will twist the truth, blame everyone else, or offer just enough kindness to keep him emotionally attached. That's when he makes a decision that changes everything. He stops waiting. He no longer needs the perfect apology to move forward. He doesn't need you to finally understand his pain before he can heal. He doesn't need one last conversation to convince himself that leaving was the right choice. He accepts that closure isn't always something another person gives you. Sometimes it's something you create by refusing to stay trapped in the same cycle. The moment he reaches that mindset, manipulation loses its grip. Guilt stops working because he has already forgiven himself for walking away. Empty promises stop working because he has heard them before. Emotional games stop working because he no longer feels the need to prove his worth or defend his decision. What surprises people most is how peaceful he becomes. There is no dramatic confrontation, no endless back and forth, no desperate search for the truth. He simply moves on with a calmness that cannot be shaken because he no longer depends on someone else to complete his healing. That is what makes a loyal Sigma male so difficult to pull back once he's truly done. The chains weren't broken by anger, they were broken by acceptance. And once he discovers that his peace is worth more than unanswered questions, there is very little anyone can do to make him look back. Number 6, he starts watching instead of reacting. A loyal Sigma male doesn't stop paying attention when he's been pushed too far. In fact, he pays even closer attention than before. The difference is that he no longer reacts to everything he notices. In the past, he would speak up when something felt wrong. He would ask questions, clear up misunderstandings, and give people the chance to explain themselves. He believed problems should be addressed before they grew into permanent damage. But after enough broken promises and repeated disappointments, he changes his approach. Instead of arguing, he observes. Instead of defending himself, he listens. Instead of confronting every inconsistency, he quietly connects the dots. This shift catches people off guard because they mistake his silence for ignorance. They assume he didn't notice the lie, the disrespect, or the change in behavior. What they don't realize is that he noticed everything. He simply decided that people's actions would tell him far more than another conversation ever could. A loyal Sigma male reaches a point where words lose their value if they aren't backed by consistent actions. He has heard enough apologies that led nowhere. He has listened to enough promises that disappeared the moment they became inconvenient. So he stops judging people by what they say and starts judging them by what they repeatedly do. That mindset changes how he sees everything. He notices who only calls when they need something. He notices who supports him in private but ignores him in public. He notices who remembers him when life gets difficult but forgets him when everything is going well. The interesting part is that he doesn't feel the need to announce these discoveries. He isn't collecting evidence to win an argument. He's collecting clarity so he can make better decisions about who deserves a place in his life. By the time others realize he's become quieter, he's already learned more about them than they intended to reveal. That's the power of observation. It exposes patterns that emotions often hide. And once a loyal Sigma male starts trusting patterns instead of promises, his decisions become incredibly difficult to change. He isn't reacting to a single moment anymore. He's responding to a history that has finally become impossible to ignore. Number 7, he withdraws access, not affection. One of the hardest things to understand about a loyal Sigma male is that caring about someone and giving them access to his life are not the same thing. People often assume that if he still has feelings, he will continue letting them into his world. But after being pushed too far, he learns a lesson that changes everything. Affection without boundaries becomes an invitation to be hurt again. So he doesn't always stop caring. He stops giving access. He no longer tells you about the goals he's chasing or the battles he's quietly fighting. The dreams he once shared with excitement become private. His victories happen without announcements, and his struggles remain his own. The parts of his life that were once open for you to see are now protected behind a door that stays firmly closed. At first, this change is easy to miss. He's still respectful. He still greets you with kindness if your paths cross. He doesn't create unnecessary tension or act like your enemies. On the surface, everything seems normal, but something important is missing. You no longer know what's happening in his life because you've lost the privilege of knowing. That privilege wasn't taken away out of spite. It was removed because experience taught him that not everyone who is close to you deserves to stay close. A loyal Sigma male begins to understand that access is earned, not assumed. Just because someone once had a front row seat in his life doesn't mean they automatically keep it forever. Trust has to be protected, especially after it has been broken. What surprises people most is how peaceful he becomes once he stops oversharing. He no longer feels the need to explain every decision or seek validation for every move. His life becomes quieter but also stronger. because it is no longer open to unnecessary opinions, criticism, or disappointment. That is why this shift feels so permanent. When a loyal Sigma male withdraws access, he isn't building a wall to punish someone. He's building a gate with higher standards, and once that gate closes, getting back inside takes far more than words. It takes consistent actions, rebuilt trust, and time, because he has learned that the most valuable parts of his life should never be handed to the wrong people twice. Number 8, he stops correcting your opinion of him. There comes a point when a loyal Sigma male realizes that not every misunderstanding is an accident. Some people have already decided who they want him to be, and no amount of explaining will change their minds. In the past, he would try. He would calmly explain what he meant. He would clear up false assumptions, defend his intentions, and give people the full story because he believed honesty deserved a chance. He wasn't trying to win an argument. He simply wanted to be understood. But after being pushed too far, he notices a painful pattern. Some people don't ask questions because they want answers. They ask questions because they're looking for something they can use against you. Others don't misunderstand you because you failed to explain. They misunderstand you because the truth doesn't fit the version of you they've already created in their minds. That's when he stops wasting his energy. If someone wants to believe he's cold because he values peace, he lets them. If they call him distant because he stopped tolerating disrespect, he doesn't rush to defend himself. If they label him arrogant simply because he refuses to chase approval, he accepts that their opinion belongs to them, not to him. This isn't pride, it's freedom. A loyal Sigma male understands that constantly defending yourself can become another form of emotional prison. You end up spending your life trying to edit someone else's story instead of living your own. The interesting part is that his silence often frustrates people more than any argument ever could. They expect him to fight for their approval. They expect long explanations, emotional debates, or endless attempts to prove his innocence. Instead, they get calm acceptance. He has learned that people who truly know his character don't need constant explanations, and people determined to misjudge him probably wouldn't believe them anyway. Number 9, he promotes you to stranger status. One of the coldest things a loyal Sigma male can do isn't raising his voice or cutting someone off with anger. It's something much quieter. He begins treating you the same way he would treat a complete stranger. That may not sound harsh at first, but think about what it really means. A stranger receives basic respect, simple kindness, and polite conversation, but nothing more. They don't have access to your deepest thoughts. They don't know your struggles. They aren't the first person you call with good news. They exist outside your inner circle. When a loyal Sigma male moves someone into that category, it's because something valuable has been lost. Trust. People often expect him to become bitter after they've pushed him too far. They expect sarcastic comments, silent treatment, or constant reminders of what they did wrong. Instead, they get something they never saw coming: normality. He greets them politely if they meet. He keeps conversations short and respectful. There is no tension in his voice and no desire to reopen old wounds. The emotional connection that once made the relationship special has simply disappeared. For many people, this is far more painful than open conflict. Arguments at least prove someone still cares enough to fight. But being treated like everyone else sends a different message. It says, "You no longer hold a unique place in my life." That realization is difficult to accept because loyalty once gave them privileges that strangers could never have. They knew his fears, his ambitions, his humor, and the quiet side of him that very few people ever get to see. Now those doors are closed, and they are standing on the outside with everyone else. The most surprising part is that he doesn't make this decision out of hate. Hate still requires emotional energy. A loyal Sigma male has simply reached the point where he no longer wants to carry the weight of resentment. By letting go of the emotional attachment, he also lets go of the need to punish. He doesn't erase your existence. He erases your special status. And once someone becomes just another face in the crowd, earning their way back into his inner world is one of the rarest second chances he will ever give. Number 10, he turns the pain into infrastructure. Most people think pain only leaves scars. A loyal Sigma male sees something else. He sees raw material. When he's pushed too far, he doesn't spend the rest of his life replaying conversations or wishing people had treated him differently. He asks a different question. What can this teach me that comfort never could? That question changes everything. The disappointment that could have broken him becomes the reason he raises his standards. The betrayal that stole his peace becomes the reason he protects it more carefully. The loneliness that once felt unbearable becomes the place where he learns to depend on himself instead of waiting for others to show up. He doesn't waste his pain, he puts it to work. The hours he once spent chasing people are invested in building skills. The energy he poured into fixing one-sided relationships is redirected toward improving his health, growing his career, strengthening his finances, or creating a life that no longer depends on someone else's approval. This is why people are often shocked months or years later. They expect to find the same man they left behind, still angry, still complaining, still waiting for an apology that never came. Instead, they find someone who has quietly built a completely different life. His confidence is stronger, his discipline is sharper, his boundaries are clearer, not because life became easier, but because hardship became his teacher instead of his excuse. A loyal Sigma male eventually realizes that pain can either become a permanent address or a construction site. He refuses to live in it forever. He uses it as the foundation for something better. That doesn't mean he forgets what happened. It means he refuses to let the experience be meaningless. Every disappointment becomes another brick. Every setback becomes another lesson. Every broken promise becomes another reason to build a future that rests on his own choices instead of someone else's words. Number 11, he quietly removes your emergency access. One of the greatest signs of loyalty is knowing that no matter what happens, there is someone you can call. A loyal Sigma male is often that person. He shows up when others disappear. He answers late-night calls, offers practical help, and stands beside people when life becomes difficult. He doesn't make a big announcement about it. He simply becomes the dependable person everyone assumes will always be there. That's exactly why his final decision surprises so many people. When he's been pushed too far, he quietly removes your emergency access. He doesn't send a message saying, "Don't ever call me again." He doesn't make dramatic declarations or slam the door in your face. Instead, he reaches a calm conclusion. The person who repeatedly took his loyalty for granted no longer has unlimited access to his strength. This isn't about refusing to help people in need. It's about recognizing the difference between someone facing a genuine crisis and someone who only remembers you when they need rescuing. For too long, he may have been the one solving problems that weren't his to carry. He answered every urgent request, sacrificed his own time, and stepped in whenever things fell apart. Yet when he needed support, the silence was often louder than any excuse. Eventually, he notices the pattern. He realizes that being reliable should never mean being repeatedly used. Loyalty was never meant to be a one-way street where one person carries all the weight, while everyone else simply benefits. From that moment on, he protects his availability as carefully as he protects his peace. People are often shocked when they discover they can no longer rely on him the way they once did, not because he has become heartless, but because he has become wiser. He understands that constantly saving people who never value your presence slowly teaches them to value only your usefulness. A loyal Sigma male refuses to let that become his identity. So when he removes your emergency access, he's not punishing you. He's reclaiming his time, his energy, and his self-respect. And once he decides that your constant emergencies are no longer his responsibility, he rarely looks back, because he has finally learned that the strongest act of loyalty is sometimes being loyal to himself. Number 12, he doesn't break. He becomes unreachable. People often assume that if you push a loyal Sigma male too far, you'll eventually see him fall apart. They expect anger, bitterness, or some public display of heartbreak. They wait for the emotional collapse, because that's what usually happens when someone has invested so much in a relationship. But that's not what makes him different. He doesn't break in the way people expect. He becomes unreachable, not physically, emotionally. The man who once answered every call, listened without judging, and made room for people in his life slowly becomes someone they can no longer reach. It's as if an invisible bridge has disappeared. They can still see him, speak to him, even exchange polite words, but the connection they once had is gone. What makes this so powerful is that it isn't driven by anger. Anger burns hot, but eventually cools. His decision is made in complete clarity. He has finally accepted that loyalty without respect eventually turns into self-neglect, and he refuses to keep paying that price. From that moment on, he becomes incredibly difficult to pull back into old patterns. The guilt that once worked no longer affects him. The promises that once gave him hope no longer sound convincing. Even emotional apologies lose their impact if they aren't supported by consistent actions. He has learned that real change isn't found in beautiful words, but in repeated behavior. People often mistake this for pride. It isn't. It's protection. He understands that every time he ignored his own boundaries, he taught others that those boundaries didn't matter. Every time he accepted less than he deserved, he made it easier for the cycle to continue. Becoming unreachable is his way of ending that cycle once and for all. The hardest truth for those left behind is realizing that they didn't lose him in one dramatic moment. They lost him one broken promise, one ignored warning, and one repeated disappointment at a time. By the time they finally decide to value him, they discover something they never expected. He isn't hiding, he isn't waiting, he has simply built a life that no longer requires the people who repeatedly taught him the cost of giving too much and receiving too little. That is why becoming unreachable is far more permanent than walking away. It isn't distance, it is a decision. A loyal Sigma male is often misunderstood because the world pays more attention to loud reactions than quiet decisions. People notice anger, they notice arguments, they notice dramatic exits. What they often fail to notice is the calm man who has silently reached his limit. The truth is, loyalty was never meant to be an unlimited resource. It is one of the most valuable gifts a person can offer, and like every valuable gift, it deserves to be respected. The moment loyalty is mistaken for weakness, patience for permission, or kindness for dependence, the countdown to losing that person has already begun. What makes a loyal Sigma male different isn't that he never gets hurt. It's that he refuses to let pain make him bitter. Instead, it makes him wiser. He learns to recognize patterns instead of empty promises. He chooses peace over endless conflict. He protects his time, his energy, and his self-respect with the same commitment he once gave to everyone else. And perhaps that's the biggest lesson of all. Never assume someone will always be there simply because they always have been. The people who love deeply often leave quietly, not because they stopped caring, but because they finally started caring about themselves too. If you take one lesson from this video, let it be this: cherish loyalty while you still have it. Respect the people who stand by you without being asked. Don't wait until their silence replaces their presence to realize what they meant to your life. By then, the opportunity to make things right may already be gone. Thank you for watching all the way to the end. If this video gave you a new perspective on loyalty, self-respect, and the Sigma mindset, don't let the journey stop here. Subscribe to the channel for more thought-provoking videos that go beyond the surface and uncover the hidden truths about human nature, psychology, and personal strength. Give this video a like if it spoke to you, and share it with someone who needs to hear this message today. I'd also love to hear from you. Which point resonated with you the most? And have you ever experienced the moment when someone's loyalty finally ran out? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Your story could inspire someone else. Until our next video, protect your peace. Value those who value you, and never forget this: loyalty is one of the rarest treasures in this world. Once it's lost, even the deepest regret may not be enough to bring it back.